I love Minecraft, from the blocky design to the funky mobs to the gorgeous terrain. I've been playing since beta, but have never stuck to a world longer than a year. Today that changes as I've been inspired to finally make a world that I can push through the updates. But I don't want just any run-of-the-mill world. I want something with a bit of a challenge. So I decided that I would make a SuperFlat survival world to see just how far I can go in it. Now right off the bat, I'm sure anyone would notice that this isn't an average SuperFlat world. And that's because it isn't. It's actually a modified overworld flat world where I removed the vast majority of the stone layer and left it as an open void that I'll have to be careful about. But looking around, you'd have to admit that it's beautiful. Though I barely got to take in my surroundings as I happened to spawn 5 feet from a village. Immediately I started ransacking the place as all of their stuff was rightfully mine anyway. All of the hay scattered about would be incredibly useful as trading would be a requirement for getting a lot of the different materials. And the farmers would pay a decent amount for their food that I was now holding hostage. I took note of the iron golem in town so as not to forget about him before having a chance to rifle through his pockets for loose iron, though I did get a bit distracted by the town drunk having a bit too much fun with the stall. The leather worker in town had some nice shoes that fit me perfectly along with a snazzy new hat, and I ransomed off some of the wheat to the farmer for a hefty sum of emeralds. I did save a bit of wheat in my new shoes for a rainy day, however. It was around this time I remembered I forgot to add in a day counter, which you should see popping in right about now. I went into yonder distance to loot a ruined portal, but was mesmerized by the bees living in what I can only assume was a block of pure LSD. Either that or my meds need a bump. It seemingly fixed itself, so I shoved the thoughts aside and went back towards the portal. The chest was full of garbage, who could have guessed? Though it did have a pretty fire starter that I decided to test out on a nearby security guard. He was more flame resistant than I expected him to be, so I gave him the old what for, but he was immune to my measly attempts to antagonize him. Until he was no longer melting into a puddle on the grass and started chasing me, and I did the noble thing and fought him one-on-one, from inside the safety of a house. He put up a good fight by not throwing any punches and let me wail on him until he coughed up his lug nuts. At this point, I decided this town wasn't big enough for me and started walking north. You might be asking, why north? To which I would say, why does anyone do anything? I did find the remains of Porky the Unlucky Pig, who had suffocated inside his pen when a cruel farmer decided to firmly place his hay right on top of him. Now, we're going to skip ahead here a bit, as there's a lot of the same. Find a village, loot the houses, steal the hay, sell the hay, kill the golems, stop the occasional portal. This went on for a while until I had enough iron to be able to start a mass genocide machine. So, we'll cover the highlights. I spent a short stint as a firefighter. I did my best to save that little house until I stopped looking at it. If I can't see it, it's not important anyway. At the next village, I got rewarded for my efforts by managing to find sugarcane, but later I found that those drugged up bees from earlier might have laced the air around them and my hoe turned into pure drugs, which I lost only about 2 seconds later. I got a fun fire stick to use against an iron giant, which made it a bit more of a fair fight. The largest horse I had ever laid eyes on refused to be my friend until I rode him so hard he could no longer refuse. I made sure to remember where I left him, but as of writing this, he might as well be on Mars for all I know. I found what I thought would be a nice spot to settle down out here in the prairie and slapped my stuff down and started to dig. I felt a hole in the ground would be a nice change of scenery. I got enough stone for a furnace, and I went back up to get some trees to cram inside of it to burn. I used the charcoal for torches and keep the creepy crawlies out of my precious hole. I started planting trees around the portal, hoping that when I got lost I could see a huge clump of leaves in the distance and recognize it as home. And as I was digging out some more space to live in, I found iron and copper ore, which felt like a slap in the face considering all the war crimes I committed getting what I had managed to scrape off the golems' corpses, but it was starting to be a spot I could live in. Immediately I began digging out a spot for the chests that would contain the spoils for my farm, and I gathered up the resources I'd need and got to work figuring out where the input needed to be so I could make the rest of the farm. For a short break, I decided that I wanted to have a look underground. I saw tons of mine shafts hanging down over the void, but I also spied a stronghold. Or at least what was left of one. A smart man would have waited until the farm was finished, and a smart man would have waited until he was decked out in something stronger than a leather crop top. I am not a smart man. I went straight up top and headed in the general direction of the ruins, and after digging around a bit, I found myself directly over the portal room. I fought with the water placement a bit, but I managed to knock off the baddies that were hanging out on top and made the brilliant idea to hop down. I managed to loot a few chests before making the mistake of trying to spleef a creeper, and he decided it would be funny to release the silverfish at me, to which I strongly disagreed with. And after nearly losing my life in what I consider to be one of the most embarrassing ways possible, I went back and destroyed the spawner, taking in my victory for only a moment before going back to the safety of my hole. Nearly dying on such a small adventure put things into perspective. I needed to finish the farm. The input set, the hole dug, the zombie collection made. I was ready for the tedious part, collecting the villagers. I made sure to kidnap one from each of the closest villages so as not to arouse suspicion. But honestly, who would they have told? There's no golems anymore for some weird reason. The morning of day 8, I thought that I needed a friend, so I used what little bit of copper I had to make one. Say hello to Cooper. Isn't he just the cutest? On my way back with the second victim, I was interrupted by someone I never thought I'd be happy to see. He only had some cherry saplings to offer me, which luckily for him was good enough. We said our goodbyes as he questioned nothing of what I was doing. With the villagers finally where I needed them to be, all that was left was the zombie. Since it was still early in the day, I spent some time spawn-proofing the area around the farm to make sure the golems spawn where they can get what they deserve. I got the water and lava placed down just as the sun was starting to set, so I waited. And somehow luring the zombie into the boat hole was the easiest part of all this. And the moment he went in, the golems started to spawn, so finally, I had passive, humanely sourced iron. In the morning, I saw some skeletons hanging out under the trees, and I thought, I could take it. I nearly perished fighting the two of them off, but after seeing another one, I quickly forgot the lesson I just learned, then died. It was here I took a break for lunch to think about the mistakes I've already made and came back having learned nothing. Having now been humbled, I went about my way planting more cherry trees for my future bass vision. Then I thought it best to lose basically the entirety of day 10 to sleeping away a thunderstorm. I woke up invigorated listening to the sounds of golems perishing and got right back to work collecting more wood. I realized that I would need more water close at hand as a surprise tool that'll help us later. So I went and stole some from the well at one of the nearby villages. It's not like they need it anyway. If they're gonna stay in this world, then they're gonna earn their keep. I replanted cherry trees every time I was able and felt like it in between going in and out of my hole. Then for some reason I fiddled around in my inventory with the water buckets. Here I took about 5 minutes in a creative world to slap together a rough idea of what I had envisioned in my head before coming back and realizing I did not have 2 of the resources I would need to accomplish this project. No worries, however, for the glorious wandering trader I met earlier could appear and have exactly what I needed. Spoiler alert, I never saw him again. Maybe he was unhappy with my hole, I don't know. I spent some time making torches to brighten up the area around me to keep the monsters at bay, as I was not yet confident enough to build a wall, but rest assured when I do, they will be paying for it. It was here I remembered I added a cool data pack that shows the time if I have a clock on me, so I made one. I acknowledged how cool it looked and thought about how useful that would be, then never looked at it again. After spending 10 days in a hole in the ground, I finally took some time to pretty it up a bit. I swear I'm a much better builder than this guy, just give me some time. When I went back up, I found a golem had gotten loose somehow and confronted him about it, to which he was not very enthused, and after being an idiot for a bit and not figuring out how he managed to escape, it was a trapdoor I never broke by the way, I began lighting up the grass while contemplating a mod that allows torches to set nearby blocks on fire. Purging the thoughts of the devil from my mind, I used the power of prayer to see numbers that told me exactly where his demons could spawn. I placed as many torches around my area as I could before I got bored of it, and ignored how much it might look like a poor man's seance circle from any passing planes. Heading back to the safety of the hole to escape the rain, I considered a mob farm and took another look under the void. The mine shaft, if you were to even call it that, would be a problem, but I went to bed and decided that was a problem for day 13 meeting. Surely that won't jinx it. I dug around for a bit in the spot I thought was correct and managed to get it wrong more than 0 times. Eventually I managed to make my way over the top of it and work my way down. I removed the immediate threats to my life, not wanting to make 3 deaths in this video, foreshadowing, and carefully surveyed my surroundings. I even managed to get an achievement for firing baby's first bow, but then I saw him. A chicken jockey. Knowing what I must do and having more than enough strength to do it, I mean, look at him, it's a toddler, I procured my greatest treasure that I'll never get to listen to. Everything was mad at me for getting it, but I wasn't leaving without that chicken. I knew I'd need a staircase for it to walk up because, as we all know, chickens can't swim. At least none of mine could. But it didn't matter anyway, because when I looked back to check on my new feathered son, he was gone. So I left without the chicken. After returning to the hole, I made a treasure chest for my spoils of travel and made an anvil. Combining my helmets, I made my crown and was very proud of it. No one can dispute my title now. I went back up into the rain and gave a villager in one of the towns a job through sheer force of will. I needed a fisherman, and he was going to be one whether he liked it or not. I bought 10 buckets of cod and 12 campfires just to be able to get one of the worst fishing rods I could have possibly gotten from him, which I assume was out of protest. So I left, but not before locking him inside his home to be forgotten by time. And when I eventually return to find his bones crumpled up next to the barrel, I will do him the honor of burying him and the dishonor of making sure no one knows where. I then went to towns I had not pillaged before, but not to raid them. I was there on business. I found a librarian and tried to get a good trade out of him for all of 2 minutes before packing up and leaving him also locked in his home. He has a friend though, so don't worry. Continuing my search, I eventually found what I was looking for. A cleric. I decided that I needed redstone for my mob farm that I planned to build, and he was the only way of getting it. We struck a fair deal and I stole his brewing stand, then headed back to the hole, eager to start my new project. Back under the world, I started on my platform. I took about 10 seconds of looking up mob farm designs before deciding I would do it myself as that's more fun, which would later turn out to be a mistake. Everyone has a mob farm that makes them fall down, so obviously that was boring, which meant mine had to make them go up and burn on campfires, because I had 12 of them. After coming back up, I found another golem on the run, which didn't stand a chance. And there was a lot of back and forth of collecting wood and going back down to place said wood, but on day 17, I took a break to enjoy a scenic view somewhere new. The Nether. Looking up, I saw Soul Sand Valley and some fossils, which reminded me that I could have a happy ghast. I wanted a new friend, and the devil must have heard me being happy and asked if I wanted to see a magic trick. I did not, but it was never up to me. If you thought the trick was burning to death from the lava, then you don't have a sense of humor, because I woke up in a random bed in a random nearby village. Don't ask why, it's unimportant. When I hopped back into hell, I managed to retrieve most of my things, and pressed forward, determined to collect my reward at the top of this cliff. There was no reward, only punishment for my belief in one. I didn't leave empty-handed though, as I collected some bone blocks and much needed soul sand. I went back to the flat space and used my newfound bone meal to grow my trees quicker than ever. It was here I realized that all of my bread had been turned into toast during my outing in the Nether, so now is as good a time as any to make a crop farm. After forgetting how water works, I placed more of it and planted my fields. Then it was right back to the mob farm project. I capped it off and marked out the space for where they would come up to be collected. To know your enemy is to know yourself. That is a famous quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which makes perfect sense because I am my own worst enemy as I paused the recording to go have a snack and something to drink and forgot to unpause when I sat back down, so I know better than anyone that I am an idiot. Luckily, the only lost footage was of me replacing the trapdoor with a path block at the iron farm. I finished digging out the hole so I could begin building up the float chamber. I made sure to harvest the crop farm every time I came back for wood, and on day 20 I had built the chamber to the top. After making the burn ward and collection boxes for the needy, me, I built a cobble generator in my hole, which to no one's surprise I set up wrong and made obsidian. For some reason I thought I could waterlog lava, knowing full well it's not water. One fix of my mistake later, I had all the cobble I could ever need to cap off the mob farm, which I did, and then spent the better part of day 20 fighting water and signs. I realized the monstrosity I was making long before any of you, but we all have to live with it now. I went down for the final time to remove the torches still inside, and on day 21, it was finished. If 2012 me could see this, he would be sickened. And the best part is that it uses exactly 0 redstone. I decided that I needed something very important to really finish off the first 25 days strong, and wouldn't you know it, I proved myself to be so incomprehensibly stupid for a second time by not unpausing the recording after getting a phone call. All of day 22, gone, just like that. Thankfully, nothing of value was lost, as all I did was trap a sheep and replace my zombie in the iron farm, which had died in some freak accident. I was now on the hunt for a second sheep to breed with mine. As I was wandering around, I saw another house fire and was going to help, but had I not retired from the department, so I left it to be someone else's problem. Probably the zoning board that let the man build his house on top of lava in the first place. After not finding any sheep, I stole the wool from a village and went back home. Forgot how to make a loom and almost threw up from having to use the recipe book. I sheared the only sheep I had around, which only dropped one. Then I went back to the nether to look once more for a dried gas to make my new friend. Didn't find it. Went back into the hole to get started on the banners that I needed, and I spent a long time waiting for Gertie, that's why I just named the sheep right now in this exact moment, to eat and replenish his wool so I could finish my final project in time. He ended up going through just a phase, and I had everything I needed. And it was more beautiful than I could have ever possibly imagined. Alright, though I made a lot of mistakes and died a few times, I had a ton of fun making this, and I'm going to keep it going. I already have so many plans for what I want to do in this world, so tell me what you think or would like to see in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.